Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to visit with me to learn more about my book, American Insanity. So the first question I want to answer is why I chose the title American Insanity. Well, I chose that title because I felt that it best describes what I write about in my book, namely all of the insane corruption occurring within our federal government and the unconstitutional atrocities being committed against those it was created to serve. I wrote American Insanity to help shed some light on the level of corruption that really exists within our federal government, the extent to which our federal government is abusing its powers and is infringing upon our constitutional rights. Having been a part of the Washington bureaucracy, or the swamp if you prefer, for 11 years, I am very familiar on how that swamp works. So it is that swamp and the corruption within that swamp that I address at length in my book, American Insanity. But before I move on to talk about my book and what issues I address, I want to start by answering questions that were asked during yesterday's session, which I wasn't able to get to. The first question came from Kimberly Pickle. She asked, what specific aspects of the constitutional republic are highlighted as being at risk of erosion or transformation? Well, to start with, the four amendments of the Constitution being consistently attacked are the First, Second, Fourth, and Sixth Amendments, which ironically are all part of the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, and I'm just going to tell you or address the part I'm going to address, abridging the freedom of speech or to petition the government for a redress of grievance. Now, examples of the deterioration and outright ignoring of our Constitution is the government's collusion with social media to restrict conservative viewpoints. The Second Amendment is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Constitution says shall not be infringed, yet there are consistent attempts by all levels of government to either eliminate or severely restrict gun ownership. It's never ending. The last amendment that's being eroded and ignored is the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated. Well, we have many examples, and this is just a couple examples of all the violations of this amendment committed by the government. And one of them is the invasion of Trump's home and the removing of some of his personal or his wife's personal belongings. One other example is the Catholic home invasions of those who prayed at abortion clinics. There was no reason for the FBI to come charging in with a tactical team because some individual and his two kids were praying in front of an abortion clinic. And another example is our Trump associates, people who are associated with him or worked with him. Their homes have been invaded, and computers, laptops have been seized and taken away with no real justification. And I said it's the last one, but the Sixth Amendment, I forgot. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusations, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Now, examples of the government trashing this amendment is the January 6th prisoners. Now, they may have done wrong, but far too many of them are still being held with no charges having yet been filed. And we're 3 years out from that incident. Another example is the January 6th congressional hearings, where only the prosecution side were allowed to have witnesses, and those witnesses were not allowed to be cross-examined. Another example is Trump's trial, in which the judge refused to allow Trump to speak in his defense, and another one of his trials in which expert witnesses were not allowed to testify regarding value of his property. In terms of erosion of our constitutional republic, you have to begin by understanding that our form of government is a capitalistic form under the Constitution. Our government has steadily been moving away from a capitalistic government towards a Marxist or a socialist, if you will, form of government since the mid-1960s with President Johnson's Great New Deal. There were over 15 new social programs created, and just to name a very, very few, Social Security, Medicare, they were enacted with the Great New Deal. And an example of more recently is the Affordable Care Act. These are socialist programs. I know many believe that they're needed, and that's possibly true. But the fact is that these are socialist programs, and they are not capitalist programs supported by our Constitution. The next question comes from Julie Smith, who asked, "What do you say about the idea that bureaucracy has become an unofficial fourth branch of government?" My answer is a fourth branch of government referred to as the federal bureaucracy, exists and was created with the implementation of President Johnson's Great New Deal Act of 1965. That act created so many socialist programs that a whole new branch of government had to be created to administer those programs. And unfortunately, it is this fourth branch of government that really now governs our country. It is not Congress. I go into depth about this fourth branch and how and why it is this unelected branch of government that is governing the United States. Mary Brown asked, which presidential candidates do you have your eye on? My answer, well, I'm not going to say during my sessions because it may cause people with strong opposing political viewpoints to not buy my book. But if you read my book, it becomes pretty clear where I stand. My next question comes from Paul Kiefer, who asked, seeing as there's an election this year, what's your outlook? My answer is, well, at this point, we know that the Republican candidate will be Donald Trump. I do not believe that the Democrat candidate will be Joe Biden. And although there have been several names thrown out there, I'm not at all sure who that person will be, although I do lean to believing it will be a female of color. My greatest fear is that regardless of who wins, there will be a lot of accusations of fraud and cheating. I'm not sure at all that our country can get through such a situation as 2020 without dire consequences to our country. So let's hope that that doesn't happen. The next question comes from Nicole Gulalori, who asked, have you been following what happened in Texas? My answer is, if you're talking about Governor Abbott's decision to activate the Texas National Guards to bring security to a portion of the Texas border with Mexico, the answer is yes. I am closely following that situation because President Biden is threatening to use force to remove the guards from protecting the border. The Customs and Border Patrol Union has officially stated that they and the Border Patrol stand behind Governor Abbott, as have the Texas National Guardsmen. If Biden tries to use military force to remove the guards, we're heading into a civil war. And that's not good under any circumstances, but it is especially not good when at the same time we're on the verge of World War III. Next question comes from James Kane. Do you have any ideas on how to make our government more transparent? My answer is the only real mechanisms which can bring about transparency is by holding those in power accountable. This can only be done by we the people. It is by all citizens becoming fully engaged with the political activity in Washington, which I know most people are not comfortable with, but they need to pay attention. And when they're concerned about something going on, they need to make their voices known or their thoughts known through phone calls, letter writing. They can make a difference by attending campaign events and asking hard questions, by participating in election processes, such as poll observers and poll workers, by ending the reelection of the same corrupt people over and over again. I don't know why it is, but it just seems like no matter how bad a congressman or woman does come reelection, the people just seem to forget all the wrongdoings that person committed and reelect that person. So again, only we the people can bring transparency. Congress is not going to do it on themselves. So it's up to we the people. And we do need transparency if we're going to save our constitutional republic. And it's our civic duty in helping run our government to make sure that those we elect share our values and expectations. The problems we're living with today with our federal government are problems we, the people, allowed to happen because we were too busy or apathetic to get involved, keep vigilant on what was going on in Washington. And if their actions did not meet our values or abide by the Constitution, to immediately get in contact with that representative and let them know that we're watching and we will react. My book does address all of the above concerns that these individuals have presented. So now to go on, today I want to address how corruption and ineptness gets embedded into the federal government bureaucracy. One of the most significant problems within our federal government is the incompetency and ineptness of those who serve within our government, not just with those we elect, but with those who serve within the federal bureaucracy. But let me be clear that I certainly don't mean to say that every government employee within the Washington bureaucracy is incompetent. That's not at all the reality. But the problem is there are enough of them who are incompetent to make the federal bureaucracy inefficient at delivering the services it was created to deliver. These inept employees not only undermine the credibility of their department or agency, but the credibility of their fellow employees and the government as a whole. So how is incompetency created? That's a good question. Well, the incompetency arises from an employee who actually is doing a good job. In other words, if one is good at doing his or her job, they get promoted. If they're promoted, if they're good at that job, they get promoted again and again until they reach a position in which they're incapable of handling, which is far too often a position in management. Viola, the biggest difference, and I'm 78, so I can go back quite a bit. But back when I was in my 20s and 30s, I knew that, members of Congress were able to get into heated debates about various concerns and issues. And then at the end of the day, go out and have lunch together and maintain a friendship. That's not true today. Today, we're so divided, and our Congress is so divided that if one doesn't agree with another's ideals or philosophies or ideologies, then they just refuse to speak to them. Or if they do speak to them, it's in a very hateful, um, inappropriate manner. Our government today, compared to then, back in my day, we had a deficit, a budget deficit of around $30 million. Now we're at $34 trillion and climbing. In our country back then, we could leave our doors open at night, and we weren't that concerned because crime just wasn't rampant. There was little crime, but as time has progressed, crime has gotten worse and worse, and right now it's just out of sight. So there are a lot of differences. I mean, it's a country that is totally different. You have the woke crowd now who are undermining big businesses or individuals by threatening to have them canceled out. You have kids in school being taught horrendous material and being exposed to sexually explicit acts by transgenders. None of that happened back, when I was growing up. And I'm sure that for most of you listening, that in your younger days, America was much different than it is today. The veterans, as a veteran, the military, I think, absolutely has total control over the shape of the country. Because if we didn't have a strong, feared military, our adversaries would soon be at our door and would be taking our government over. And it's only our military, the strength of our military, and how modernized they are, that keeps countries like China, Russia, Iran at bay. So the military has a big part to play in shaping America. And as a veteran, I'm very proud to have been a part of the military and had the opportunity to serve, although there was a 13-month period that I probably didn't feel that way. Cecilia, what I found in my research was that depending on whether I was doing research on a particular person or organization that was liberal, then you got one-sided picture of a situation, which an organization that was conservative had a different point of view about it. So doing my research for the book wasn't that easy. I had to shift through and figure out what was accurate and what was not accurate, which meant I could not depend on 2 or 3 sources. I had to really dig to make sure I had as much information I needed so I could clearly decide what the truth was. So going back to how somebody, uh, uh, an inept person can harm an organization, I was talking about if one is good at their doing his or her job, they get promoted. If they're good at that job, they get promoted again and again until they're in a position which they're incapable of handling, which is far too often a position in management. Eventually, and this is definitely true within the federal government, there's a tendency for the people in charge at the upper levels of management to be incompetent. Thus, the organization as a whole becomes mismanaged throughout. Only the unpromoted workers get anything done, but their productivity is restricted by the incompetence of those in charge. This incompetency within the federal government continues unchecked because of the extensive number of laws and regulations which protect federal employees, making it extremely difficult to fire them. Employee protection laws and the unions require managers to go through extensive numbers of steps to remove a bad employee, which ends up taking an estimated 4 years of documenting that behavior and counseling, just to reach the point that you can remove that bad employee if their performance hasn't changed after all your attempts to help them change their behavior. And the problem is most managers are not willing to invest that amount of time and energy to get rid of that inept employee. The end results are that an ever-increasing number of incompetent or corrupt employees within the federal government. In recent years, those who closely follow the news have probably noticed that an astonishingly large number of government officials are astonishingly incompetent or corrupt, more than we can imagine. And they are far more incompetent and corrupt than we had thought possible. Once a sufficient number of corrupt government officials achieve a foothold, they begin to recruit and promote other corrupt people in a mutually supportive arrangement, a network of corruption. The proverbial exponential increase begins to take effect, mostly unnoticed by the general public. If it remains unnoticed, the entire system becomes saturated with ineptness and corruption, such that there is no possibility of ever reforming it from within the system, itself, because all the internal machinery of reform has itself become corrupt. It becomes the tool, not of reform, but of further corruption and of worse corruption. There are 3 levels of individual corruption. Pauline, how do you believe? There are a lot of ways, and I talk a lot about that in the book. People need to get involved with the candidates when they're running. You need to go to the meet and greets or any events that you know of that the candidate's going to be running, and then ask them hard questions. And what I do is, after a few questions go around, I ask the same question, but in a different way to see if I get the same answer. Another way is getting involved with election integrity. And there are many ways to do that. North Carolina has an election integrity team, and I believe that every state in the country has a state election integrity team. If you go online and just put the initials of your state, it's I don't remember if it's .electionintegrity.com or it's this. I think it'd be NC election integrity, all one word, .com. And you'll see many opportunities for getting involved. And then there's getting involved at your voting polls as an observer, making sure that what is supposed to happen is happening, and what is not supposed to happen is not happening. You know, you're at a position in the polling building where you can observe what exactly the poll workers are doing or saying, so you know whether or not you have an issue that you need to present to the precinct judge. Another way in which I'm involved is the Convention of States. And you can go to conventionofstatesaction.com and you'll learn all about that. The Convention of States is an Article 5 of the Constitution mechanism for we the people to circumvent the federal government and get amendments proposed in the Constitution to rein their power in. And that's what they're doing. They're working on getting, we need 34 states to pass that resolution. And we have 19 states, so we have 15 to go. I see my time is up, but before I leave, I want to invite you to go to my website, AmericanInsanity.org. That's American Insanity, one word, .org, AmericanInsanity.org. And at my wife's website, I have the links to Amazon, to Barnes & Noble, and to BookBaby, which was my publishing company. And you can purchase the book at those three links. Again, I want to invite you to visit my website. And also, well, when you're there, you can subscribe to my blog. I write blogs almost daily, talking about the latest screw-ups that our federal government officials are committing, or corruption or ineptness that I've learned about. So I keep people up to date about all that. So with that, I want to invite you to visit again tomorrow. Let's see, tomorrow it's going to be 6 o'clock. So please come and visit and ask some more questions. Okay, with that, I'll say goodbye.